Welcome to the Non-Standard Podcast. I'm your host, Manny Lampson. If this is your first time listening or your 50th time listening, this is what to expect on this episode. We dive into the concepts of developing your leadership toolbox. Why do you need this? You need this in any situation to help manage, lead, and control, and ultimately win. How do you do that? You can't use the same form of leadership in everything you do. So every episode, we dive into my leadership philosophy. We dive into the story and the background of the person we're talking to. And we also dive into some leadership traits I have accrued throughout the years. And then we also follow it up with a book review at the end. So you're getting a wide range of leadership topics and traits that you can add to your kit. So without further ado, let's go into the recap of this episode. And afterwards, if you love it, like it, share it, follow it, give us some feedback because we're only just getting started. All right, it's that time, and we're back with episode Big 40 with my man Hayden Hood. He is a captain in the U.S. Marines. We met, he is from Abilene, so that's how we met, just being here from Abilene. We've connected a few times before, but I wanted to reach out to him because I just got to branch out. This was a great way to get a Marine officer on the show, and he's got some great insight. We talked about growing up in Abilene, how his dad and his grandfather were great coaches and how that inspired him to want to join the Marines after not having a military background in his family, just growing up in the sports side of the house and wanting to challenge himself even more. We talked about how he joined the Marines. It's a little different, which is great to have him on the show to talk about that and what his 4 key concepts are to leadership: be an athlete, never fail physically in front of your Marines, make leaders, make winners, make men, and then don't walk past a problem, which we cover towards the end. And for those of you listening, you know, we start off pretty basic, the 3 H's. Then we cover my leadership philosophy. Then we get into some leadership traits, and you're always learning. So I hope you enjoy the episode. And if you love it, like it, share it, follow it, do what you got to do. All right, let's get on with the show. All right, welcome, welcome, welcome. We are ready to get this ball rolling. I am joined, just like you heard in the intro, with my man Hayden. And I'm pumped. So we originally, it was like small talk meeting. And then we met a little bit when you're getting ready to go over to where you are back in Abilene. I introduced you to some people. We talked a little bit more. I've been following you on social media. You're doing your marathon and stuff like that. Just a bunch of crazy cool things. And so I was like, man, I got to get this guy on the podcast. One, because I've expanded my leadership, episodes to multiple branches, right? And I've yet to have a Marine officer, so I'm super excited for that. I had a Marine first sergeant a couple weeks ago, and the ethos and the leadership and the lifestyle you guys live is just amazing, and I love learning about it. And so I was like, I got to reach out a little bit more and learn here. So that's what we're going to do today. We're going to get some learning in. Thanks, everybody, for listening. But we start the show the same every time with the 3 H's: hometowns, hero, and hardship. Hayden, I'll hand it off to you.
Yeah, hometown, right where you are, Abilene, Texas. I wasn't born there. I was born in Bedford in Fort Worth, but grew up my whole life really in Abilene, so I claim Abilene as my hometown. Grew up there, went to high school, went to Abilene Christian University. My dad and my grandfather, my mom, my grandma, both of my sisters all gone through ACU. So Abilene, yeah, that's where all my roots are. And that kind of leads into the heroes, which I guess the 2 I'll talk about is my dad and my grandfather, both of which I just mentioned. So my dad, Derek Hood, really just instilled in me from a young age what it means to be a winner and be an athlete, which I'll talk a bit about later as one of my leadership traits. But he was a coach, so all my life growing up, seeing him be a leader, coaching, football teams, and then really getting into track and field and cross country, where he was really successful as a coach at Abilene Christian University. And then my grandfather as well, my dad's dad, Don Hood, also a really successful coach at ACU. In the 1980s, they won every single year the national championship in track and field. So just really knew how to create a legacy and how to instill that success, obviously, in my dad, who continued that success at ACU, winning several national championships. So I really just grew up with so many good leadership figures in my life Those two being the main two ones, just kind of giving me a good framework of what it means to work hard and, really put your nose to the grindstone. Um, I had nothing but good examples around me growing up. Uh, Hardships, I would say, like I've lived a very blessed life. My parents both worked really hard. Um, my dad, he'll tell the story, and my mom will tell the story. Worked two extra jobs coming out of college, just to get my mom a wedding ring. Living basically out of a garage in a rental house that they were paying for the first few years of their marriage. And so them dealing with a lot of hardships, I think, during their early life, being married kind of prevented me from going through a lot of hardships, I think, in my early life. Really, the first time I started experiencing what I would call hardships is, just when I joined the Marine Corps, which I think is partially what I was looking for, a bit of a challenge and to push myself further than I'd been pushed in the past. So yeah, I would say most of those hardships come from the Marine Corps. The Marine Corps has given me those opportunities to grow and to really test myself as an individual and, my individual physical capabilities, but also as a leader, giving me tough leadership scenarios as well. So yeah, that's pretty much it.
Cool.
Yeah.
Let's get some questions going. I got some good ones already. What connection have you seen between sports and the military? So you grew up, some people that joined the military joined because they had a lot of military family, but yours was really the sports side and coaching. So now that you're in the military, what connection have you seen between like the sports world and the military world and connecting those and being good at both? Like, what have you seen?
Yeah, I would say the biggest one is the camaraderie. So just being a part of something bigger than yourself, putting the wants and needs of the group above your own, putting in that extra work, not just to make yourself better, but to make everybody else around you better. And yeah, that comes from an early age of playing sports, especially like the team sports that I grew up playing, like football, baseball, basketball. You see a lot of those reflections in the Marine Corps, where it's just working as a team, and coming together to win. Yeah, that's definitely the biggest similarity for me. And then kind of secondary to that, which is also extremely important to me, is just the physical capabilities, being, uh, capable of doing what you need to do in a stressful situation, being physically prepared for that, and just being physically dominant in any situation you enter into.
Yeah, that's great. I grew up pretty similar, very similar lifestyle. Grew up playing a bunch of sports. My dad wasn't my coach, but he was always there, and I was really close to my coaches because of my dad's relationship with them. So even though when my dad wasn't a coach, the coaches I had were like my dad.
Yeah, yeah,
Very father figure for me. Even though I have and still have a great relationship with my dad, my high school coaches are like fathers to me. My high school coach, Coach Cox, Coach Haro, Coach Solis,
yeah,
like guys like I still talk to today, and I got that mentorship from them as well. So when you talk about
yeah.
sports
That's
and
awesome.
military, how they go hand in hand is really cool. And so it's great for you to mention that because there may be people out there who don't know what to expect from the military, but if they grew up playing sports, they can at least expect something and not feel so nervous to join. You know,
Yeah,
we do see a lot of people join because of relationships with the military in their life. And so we want to bridge that gap and have, I say, newer generation join without the military experience. And so we just want them to know, hey, if you've played sports, you'll be fine in the military. Like you'll excel, you'll succeed, you'll grow because there are so many great connections between them. And if you treat your team, your battalion, your squad, or your group like a close team, you'll do some pretty good things together.
oh yeah, 100%. I completely agree with that because I had no military, or there was really no military background in my family, so I can relate to that for sure. I think it was like purely my sports and athletic background, playing with a team, that helped me a lot, early on and so far in my career. Yeah.
Yeah, and then the second question I have is, how do you translate coaching habits to leadership habits in the military? Um, there's always a great question. What's the difference between a coach, a leader, and a manager, right? So how do you take some of those traits you've seen from your dad and your grandpa coaching to applying to leadership roles in the military?
Yeah, I think the biggest one I can always look back to seeing my grandpa, my dad, is just kind of like ruthlessly uh, enforcing a standard and like holding people accountable to that standard, like not accepting, anything less than 100%, and really driving them, you know, driving their team to success. Uh, Kind of just that will of the leader to push the team to success, a will that they might not have otherwise if that leader is not present. Um, yeah, I think in the military, it's a little, there's some differences between like a leader in the military and a coach.
Mm-hmm.
It's not necessarily commonplace to see a coach in professional sports or collegiate sports to be like the physical example.
Yeah, yeah, no,
Uh,
yeah,
like you don't see Bill Belichick benching, 225 pounds or like doing the things that his players are expected to
yeah,
do. Whereas, especially in the Marine Corps, that was one thing instilled in me very early on is, you cannot fail physically in front of your Marines. And so you have to hold yourself to that higher standard as well, uh, because you are that example, or you should be that example to your Marines. And so the moment you fail physically, you're kind of, I don't know, you're leaving a gap, right?
yeah,
And you don't want to do that. And I'm not saying like if you fail, like doing a max set of squats or something, it's
yeah.
the end of the world. That's not what I'm saying, but you should hold yourself to that standard to always excel physically in front of your Marines.
Yeah, and I think what you bring up is a great point where, you know, I think what you tried to hit is when you're failing in the areas where you should be succeeding is where it can be a bad example. But if you're failing because you're doing things above and beyond, right? Like your Marines looking at you and they're like, man, Hayden just, let's just say, for example, you went out like you ran your marathon, right? And let's say you got hurt or you didn't finish. That could be failing in some perspective, but in their eyes, you went out, you tried something hard, you pushed yourself, and you're just going to come back later and do it again. So there's those different areas of failure that you mentioned. The one you don't want them to see is where you should be succeeding. Like showing up late, like failing a PT test, those things that you can control.
Yeah.
When you fail those areas, those are the ones where you guys sort of look yourself in the mirror and be like, okay, man, like let's gut check myself here. But I want to bring back the coaching um, physical feature, that we see in sports. And I think what ties into that is in sports, we know those coaches like played the game, right? So
Mhm.
like, like Bill Belichick and, like those guys, they played the game, they grew up around it. So they have the experience, even though they may not portray it later on
Yeah.
in their life, in physical appearance. Now in the military, it's in some areas the same way. You're going to have those leaders who have been to war, they have the combat experience. So
Yeah.
they may not be in great peak physical condition, for their age, but they can balance it out where they have the experience to bring in too. So there's always that aspect. But I do think we can always maintain a very good physical fitness because that's one thing we control, like if it's not in the
Yeah.
way we look, maybe it's just that we're trying to get better and we're showing that to those below us. Where, like I take my sort of story, for example, where 3 years ago, I was bigger. I was always lifting, so I was in shape, but I didn't look like it. I just looked like an average guy. So to show, sort of that challenge or whatever, I pushed myself. I grinded. I put myself out there and got in better physical shape to show that as well on the leadership side. Where I could have just like always sat back and been fine where I was because I was strong. I challenged myself a little bit else.
Yeah.
Let's see. Yeah, I love how you brought up. Oh, yeah, that was going to be my next question. So, which route did you take to become an officer in the Marines?
So I went to OCS, the OCC route. So in the Marine Corps, you can do PLC or OCC. PLC is where you do like a 6-week program in the summer, your junior year, and then you do another 6 weeks in the summer, your senior year, and then you just commission once you graduate college. I didn't do that. I just commissioned after I graduated OCS. So I graduated from from ACU in 2019 in December, and then 2 weeks later went to OCS in January of 2020. And so that was like a 10-week just straight program. So you show up with a college degree, you do the 10-week OCC, and then you commission once you graduate there. Kind of how I found the officer program was through one of my sister's friends, actually, from high school at Abilene High. His name was Pete Hughes. He had done officer candidate school about a year before I went. I heard my sister talking about it, and they knew I was interested in the military, but I hadn't really decided between the Army or the Marine Corps, and went and got coffee with Pete Hughes one day, and he pretty much convinced me to do the Marine Corps after that 30-minute conversation. So yeah, it was something I always wanted to do. I kind of wanted to do it right out of high school, but I had the opportunity to go to ACU, and so I took it, and then about 2 years into doing a business management degree there, kind of decided that's not really what I wanted to do, at least right now. And so that's how I found the officer program there. Yeah, and then I went through the OSO, which is the Officer Selection Office in Fort Worth. So that's where I commissioned out of.
Yeah, for those listening, in the Air Force, there's other ways to commission as well. We have ROTC. You can go to the academy, which is, I think you guys go through West Point too, right? For the Marines, or how's that work? I don't know.
So for the Marine Corps, the Naval Academy is it?
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah. So from there, they can branch Marines or Navy.
Okay, so Marines and Navy, gotcha. Yep, and then Army's West Point. Okay. And then we also have the OCS option as well. For those listening, the OCS option is where you go to college and you finish and you just decide to join as an officer. It's a rare route because it's hard to find. It's hard for usually college graduates to find a way to become an officer. Most of them I've met are just enlisted, which is pretty crazy. I get a lot of younger enlisted in the Air Force. I say younger in rank, but older in age because they're like 30, 35. And I'll be like, what are you doing here? Like, I didn't know what to do after college, and enlisting is so much easier than becoming an officer. So they'll enlist and then try to go through OTS through the enlisted to officer side. So it's crazy to see the different paths to become an officer. Yeah.
It was pretty tough. The Fort Worth OSO was pretty competitive just because you have a lot of schools in that area that are all going through the Fort Worth office. And me going to ACU, which is not a very well-known university, at least in the military, I didn't have as competitive of a package. So I pretty much had to run a 300 PFT, which is like just a perfect score on the physical fitness test, to get a slot to OCS. And so when I got there, my OSO at the time, Captain Bressler, just an absolute unit of a man, like plays on the Marine Corps rugby team. He's an infantry officer. He was like my first example of a Marine Corps officer. He really challenged me with that, getting the 300 PFT, getting a perfect score. He was like, that's the only way you're going to get selected. That might have been a lie. I don't know. He might have been saying that to get me to work harder, but it worked. So got the 300 PFT finally, and then got a slot to go to OCS.
I thought of a statement you made earlier about the standards, right? So you said your grandpa and your dad have always been really big on, and it's hard to say enforcing the standards, where if we just follow the standards, we'll be successful. But I think we're in a day and age where we have to sort of enforce them, right? To just get to the standard So what have you seen, and I bring it up all the time because it's a discussion in a lot of podcasts, or this generational gap, of standards. Obviously in the Air Force, we have, I say, loosened our standards on hair and regulations, right? PT, and it's made the perception of the standard lower, but then again, it's almost like if you do the standard, you're excelling. It's weird. What have you seen? And it's an interesting conversation, but I don't know, like, what do you got on that?
I would, yeah. So there's like two different kind of worlds of enforcing the standard. It feels like in the Marine Corps, you have like the garrison side, which is the haircuts, the really tight squared away uniforms, all of that stuff where, like police that mustache from Generation Kill. And then you've got like your actual combat proficiency, when it comes down to being good at your MOS.
Yeah.
Like in infantry, being good at your job, being a good infantryman. And sometimes those two can clash. So sometimes, whether it's working really hard, being out in the field a lot, that garrison standard will fall. And some people will review or see that as a reflection of the other standard falling, which isn't always the case. So sometimes it's a constant battle. But ultimately, I think it's a good thing that you have these clashing ideologies where you have like the first sergeants who are ruthlessly enforcing the garrison standard, making sure the Marines are getting their haircuts, making sure, they're keeping their mustache within the lip, making sure they don't have holes in their uniforms. And then you have, the NCOs and the infantry that are enforcing, the MOS standard and making sure that they're capable of doing their job as an infantryman. And a lot of times those two clash, at least in my experience. But ultimately, I think having both of them is good, and having them clash, it's not always a bad thing, but it does happen. And sometimes if one raises, the other will drop. It's just kind of a constant balance. But I don't know. I have only had really good examples of people enforcing the standard and holding the standard in the Marine Corps on both sides. I've had really good first sergeants, and I've had really good NCOs in the infantry. So I don't really have a bad example. Yeah, I think the Marine Corps is doing a pretty good job right now of holding that standard for sure.
Yeah, no, that's what I've seen. I'll say I've seen the Marines, hold that standard as the other branches are allowing a little more leeway. The Marines are very just like, hey, this is tried and true. It's worked. It's going to keep working. Just keep. Why change it, right? Like, why change what needs to be changed? But I liked how you talk about that yin and yang to then garrison and out in the field. And then I just watched Band of Brothers for the first time, and it made me think of the beginning episodes where it has the captain in there, who's really strict at the in garrison, like, hey, we're going to be good at our job, very strict, very stickler. And then they go to the field. And what I saw is when you have those standards in garrison very tight, your field mimics that, because you're good at the basics. When you're really, really good at the basics, when you're in stressful situations, you can improve better. You can perform better because you don't have to worry about, hey, how am I doing at my job? Am I good at these little things, so that in a stressful situation, I can move on to more stressful stuff. So it reminded me of that situation in the show where it portrays that captain as like a bad leader per se, because he's like really hard on his troops. It was just unfortunate for him. He couldn't translate, I think, in the show to like the battlefield, right? Leader. And I've had those commanders that were very good in garrison. They took care of what we call the queep. They're really good at hammering down on, hey guys, just be good at this basic stuff. I know it sucks, but if you just do your training, do your CBTs, go to your medical appointments here, when we get ready to deploy or get ready to go somewhere, it's just going to be so much smoother. And so there's that translation to do there. And, there's a great, I've heard on a few podcasts, like comfort in crisis is a good time to build those relationships and build the standards in comfort so that when you move to crisis, you can just focus on the crisis. You're not worried about those things that are going to sidetrack you or really just what we call kick the penguins off the iceberg that you need up there swimming and floating around.
Yeah.
Let's see. Well, let's talk a little bit about your career, man. So what's it been like as a Marine officer? The progression, what challenge have you faced? Where are you at now? What's it like? give some people a glimpse of that world?
It's been really good. So it started off, hit the ground running. I did about a year and a half of training, all nonstop pretty much. So joined in January 2020, graduated from OCS and commissioned in March 2020, right as COVID hit. So we basically got quarantined and bussed over to start the basic school, which is where all the lieutenants go to become. So like, you know how every Marine a rifleman is the saying for the Marine Corps. Every Marine Corps officer is a rifle platoon commander.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
And so TBS is what teaches you how to become a rifle platoon commander, along with all the other basics that are important for Marine Corps officers. So it's not just the infantry guys that go there. It's also, even the finance officers, even the judge advocates. Everybody goes through the basic school. So did that from March to September. And then I was selected as ground intelligence for my MOS. So I went to the infantry officers course in September and graduated that in December. That was 100% probably the most formative time of my career in training. Just met a lot of really good leaders there. It was a really tough course, and it really pushed me and a lot of my peers, to do things that we initially probably wouldn't have been so confident in doing. But towards the end of that course, we had so much confidence in our ability, and everybody's ready to go to the fleet, and start leading Marines. So that was a really good course, and learned a lot of good things there. Following that, I went to the Scout Sniper Unit Leaders course in Quantico. So these have all been in Quantico. Went there for a month, and then following that, went to my intelligence schools. So that, full year and a half straight of just training was all uninterrupted as well. Really nothing more than like a weekend between each course. So it's kind of hectic, but it was really good because some people will have like delays or pauses in between their courses early on in their career. And I was glad I just got to go all the way straight through it. Upon graduating that and going to the fleet, my first job was a battalion intelligence officer at 2nd Battalion, 11th Marines, which is a artillery battalion with the M777 cannons, so 155 millimeter. That was very interesting because it's not exactly what was advertised for the MOS that I wanted. So for ground intelligence, everybody thinks, you get ground intelligence, you get to go be a Scout Sniper platoon commander as a lieutenant. That's kind of what they brief everybody at TBS to make people interested in the MOS, right? It's like intelligence, but I also get to do the infantry thing. So it's very appealing to me, and that's why I chose it. But got the battalion intelligence officer role right off the bat, which at first I was upset about, but I look back on it and I'm very glad that I got that year and a half at the artillery battalion because I learned a lot about, the administrative side of being an officer and how important it is to like actually read the policies and dot my I's and cross my T's. Because it was a lot of, writing policies, like for physical security, all of these things that are not the reason you join the Marine Corps initially, at least, for me, I had to learn right off the bat. So it was good. It was kind of a crash course in learning a lot of the administrative things that I needed to learn that I had neglected. Following that, one of my friends that I went to the infantry officers course at 3rd Battalion, 5th Marines, helped me get some PCA, permanent change of assignment orders, to 3rd Battalion, 5th Marines to be the Scout Sniper platoon commander there, and go on a UDP, which is a unit deployment program with them to Okinawa. So I went there for about 2 years, served as the Scout Sniper platoon commander, which is what I really wanted to do. And it was the best thing I've done in my life this far. it was such a blessing to lead those guys and learn from them and just work with them every day. Yeah, it was really good. Had a lot of good peers, really great leaders in that battalion. And it's a very storied and, uh, you know, revered battalion in the Marine Corps that's been in every combat scenario since World War One. So that was a really good experience, and I'm thankful for that. But finished that up this past May, and then moved to England because I got selected to be the exchange officer um, at a Royal Air Force unit, so an F-35 unit here in the UK. And so that leads me to now. That's what I've been doing the past 4 months. So kind of just, getting my feet dry here in the UK. Yeah, it's been good so far.
Yeah, and then so I mentioned earlier how we sort of connected, and one of those ways we got to know each other more is when you reached out and you're like, "Hey, I'm getting ready to do this job where I'm working with an aircraft we don't work with a lot. I'm going to an area where, and it's now the Royal Air Force is. Is there any other U.S. branches on there, or like who else is around you? What do you got there?"
So I'm on a base that's just purely Royal Air Force,
Okay.
but there's a few other exchange officers there. One of them is a pilot, and then one of them does supply,
Okay.
air supply. So that's really it as far as Americans working near me. But about an hour south of us is what they call the tri-base area, which is RAF Lakenheath,
Okay.
RAF Mildenhall, and RAF Feltwell, which are U.S. bases effectively. You probably know about those being in the Air Force. So yeah, the American presence is still like very close by. It's just about an hour south of me. So yeah.
Nice. Yeah. And I'm going to say some of my best working experiences have been outside of like who I normally work with, right? So working in joint operations, working in, when I was in Guam, working with the Royal Air Force out there, the Royal Koreans, not the Royal Koreans, the Rock,
The Rock,
Royal
yeah.
Air, yeah, working with them out there. Man, just big exercises like Cove North, stuff like that, where you're just bringing these people in and you're like, dang, man, it's just cool. Last
Yeah.
year I was deployed to the AOC over in Shaw, so working up there with Navy, Marines, Army, Joint Forces, and that it's just really great. I love the experience of just getting to know what other people are doing and see
Yeah.
how they live their life and what they do, and it's fun. So I'm glad you're getting that experience, and it sounds like it's going pretty good over there. So
Yeah, it's going well.
nice. All right, well, let's jump into the meat and bread and butter of this. Or was it biscuits and crumpets, or what do you guys do over there?
Yeah, crumpets. Crumpets are great, actually. Those are really good.
The leadership philosophy that I talk about on all my episodes that I've developed, and we bring it up to allow people to maybe develop their own leadership philosophy and skills to help them run their day. But mine are pretty straightforward. Lead by example in all you do. To be selfless, you have to be selfish. Build relationships based off trust and care. And then challenge the road in front of you, getting comfortable, being uncomfortable. So we jump right into it. Out of those four, which one do you feel comfortable with in your life? And, what skills and traits have you developed to be better at it? And then on the flip side, which one could you work at on those, and how would you develop it?
Yeah, so leading by example in all we do, I think, that one really sticks out to me just off the bat. I think it's really important, and it's something that gets drilled into your head really all throughout the training in the Marine Corps to become a Marine Corps officer. Is you not only need to look the part, you don't need to just be squared away with a good haircut and a good uniform. You also need to know and understand your job and the job of your Marines. You need to be, ready to answer questions. You need to be able to take risks, and you need to trust, the Marines under your charge. And all of those things kind of come back to like being good at your job. And so, leading by example, whether it's looking good in your uniform, upholding the physical standard, getting good PFT, CFT scores, knowing your job really well. Your Marines are going to see all of that. They're going to see if you're lacking, whether you know it or not. they will see it, and they'll be talking about it. So you have to lead by example, because it will affect, how your platoon, or maybe your section, if you don't have a platoon, it's going to affect it. It's going to affect how proficient whatever unit you are in is. So yeah, I think that's a very important one. Be selfless. You have to be selfish. Yeah. So that one, I've heard that one before, and it's one that I see and I initially disagree with, and then I think about it, and yeah, I do think it's very true. I can think of some of the times I've been in the worst physical shape, is when I'm kind of overworking, kind of getting into like a workaholic mode where I'm behind the computer for like 10 hours a day, building con ops, or, prepping for a range that we're going to do, building a brief, whatever it is, where I need to be selfish and take this hour and a half to go work out, or, I need to be selfish and I need to like go home before 6 p.m. on this Friday and like stop thinking about work. Yeah, so I can agree with that. You have to prioritize yourself, not above your Marines, obviously. You need to always put your Marines above yourself, but you do need to prioritize yourself in the sense that, you can't neglect those simple things. Because if you neglect them for too long, it's ultimately going to fire back, and it's going to lead to making your unit less proficient, which is what you don't want. And that's all, going to come down to just a good balance. And that's one, yeah, like when you say one I need to work on, that's one I've always kind of struggled with, is like finding that balance of prioritizing myself and my needs, while also prioritizing the needs of my Marines. Where the job I'm in now, I don't have any Marines under me. One-on-one, responsible for myself. So it's a lot easier now, than it was a year ago. It's a lot different. But yeah, I can look back at that and definitely see where, that's applicable. Yeah.
It's a hard one. And on my last episode, we were talking about it's harder for officers, because, we have to portray that 100% work, right? Like all the time, to where we have to show them work, to be successful sort of thing, instead of that, like, hey, I'm going to go leave today at 1600, or I'm going to go and take this lunch or go do this exercise in the middle of the day, something for me so I can come back stronger and ready to go. It's hard to do. And one of the ways we found to help with that is being transparent, letting your team know around you, like, hey guys, for me to continue on with this brief or this con op or this exercise, dude, I just got to go recharge, man. Like, let me go recharge for just like half a day, or, something, to de-stress. Usually when you vocalize it, people are going to be like, yeah, go do it, like you're fine to go do that stuff. It's when we try to do it on our own and without them knowing, it sort of backfires where it's harder to do. And so that's why transparency is huge. You have to build that trust with your team on, hey guys, I know we have a deadline of this, but to get there at like 100% with no errors, I need to take this time now. Or, towards the end, it's going to be, something's going to come up and we're going to be fighting fires or putting things out at the midnight oil and trying to work that. But if we can catch it early, come back, recharge, and then attack it, sort of helps there.
Yeah.
Nice. Yeah, I appreciate those. Like, man, I always know usually the one out of the four people are going to choose that they're good at. And man, just the Marines overall, like just what you were saying in the beginning of the episode, when I even had right when I said my leadership philosophy, I already know which one like he's going to, mention as number one, because it's just what you guys learn. It's what you embellish, the lead by example, not just in the work. It's everything, man. Like, and it's hard, and I think that's why I've seen, from my perspective, some of those people who stay in longer, very, very tired, very wore out, because it's a hard life to live. Early on, lead by example in all you do, it's sort of that 100 mindset all the way. But there's a lot of ways you can cope with that. If you love what you do, if you're passionate, if you have the relationships around you, it sort of helps you maintain that lead by example mantra.
Yeah. Yeah.
Cool. You did mention you have some 4 leadership traits you want to bring that you sort of have on your your book. What are they? And if
Yeah.
you want to explain them to some people out there, that'd be great.
Yeah. So the Be an Athlete is my first one. So
Okay, yeah,
that's,
that's a good,
yeah,
yeah.
that's the one that my dad and my grandpa kind of always instilled in me growing up. Be an athlete. It's kind of just more than, be athletic. Like it is figuring stuff out. Like when you don't know what's going on or you're in a tough situation, where you get your shit rocked, be an athlete, figure it out, get up, get off the ground, stop whining, um, and just go do the thing. That's kind of what it means to me, which I found just echoing in my head a lot during really tough times, whether it was in training or, on an exercise, whatever it would be, like just kind of hearing my dad and my grandpa's voice, just saying, be an athlete, and figure it out, which I know it's like kind of it's a weird one. But yeah, that's one that I've always, held myself to. But that kind of also goes with like never fail physically in front of your Marines, which the first time I heard that was from a Royal Marine Corps captain. So from the UK, he was on exchange at the infantry officers course, that I went to in Quantico. And I remember him saying that because we were doing a live fire range and we'd been in the field for, I think it was about a week at this point. And he had brought a barbell and weights out to the range. And we're all like, who is this Royal Marine captain? Like we hadn't interacted with him very much. And then I just remember that week, him pulling us in and mentioning that, like, never fail physically in front of your Marines. The second you do that, you're done. They're not going to respect you, whatever it is. And at first I was like, that can't be true. Like, do I have to win every race? Do I
Yeah.
always have to do more pull-ups? But I do think it's a good thing to keep in the back of your head. Um, Obviously, you're never going to be flawless. Like I can think of a good example is ground fighting. Like it's kind of like jujitsu for the Marine Corps, McMap,
Yeah.
stuff like that. I have lost ground fights to some of my Marines who are just insanely good, or a lot bigger than me. And so obviously you're gonna lose in some competition or something every now and then, but you do need to hold yourself to a standard and always keep in the back of your mind that you cannot fail physically in front of them. And different people will define failure differently. But yeah, it doesn't mean you will never mess up. It just means, it's kind of holding yourself to that standard. The second one I have is take risks and trust your NCOs. So I remember when I first got to the Scout Sniper platoon, uh, like really wanting to do a lot of training, but kind of staying within these lanes. And I was kind of micromanaging how we did things because I was really nervous, that I was going to mess up. Something bad would happen. Somebody would get hurt in training or something. So I kept like kind of like really tight guardrails on some of the training we would do with like the ranges we did, the live fire. And then as I built that trust on my NCOs and like these ideas they had, that they were giving to me for ranges they wanted to do, doing more like dynamic live fire. When I just started trusting them and letting them build their own training, and letting them go with the ideas that they had, we got so much better. Because I wasn't holding like a tight fist around the platoon. I was letting the team leaders build their own training, come up with new ideas for how we did ranges, and it ultimately made the platoon a lot better. And that kind of peaked, on our last deployment, whenever we got to do some really cool training, just because I took more risk and really trusted my NCOs and trusted that, they were doing their due diligence, in the planning process. I didn't micromanage it. I did my due diligence as far as reviewing what they had and like, making sure it was safe. But I didn't control it as much as I did initially. So that's something I kind of had to learn. It was really coached into by just several like really good leaders in my battalion, but just trusting them. And that ultimately, led to way better training and made the platoon so much more lethal, which was good. The third one I had this was in my fit rep. So it's like the fitness report. I don't know what y'all call it in the Air Force.
We just call ours just PT test assessment, maybe physical fitness assessment. Yeah.
So our fitness report, it's like, well, it's not about fitness at all. It's kind of funny.
Oh,
It's like your official review for how you're doing at your job,
is
basically.
it like a yearly one? Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, we call ours our OPB, Officer
Okay.
Performance Brief now.
Yeah, so ours is called a fit rep or fitness
Okay.
report. And if you're a lieutenant, you get one every 6 months.
Gotcha.
And then past that, you get it annually. But yeah, there's a sentence on mine that I really like where it gives you your billet description, which is basically these are the things you have to do in order to be successful at this job. That way, if you're not doing those things, you get held accountable. And the last bullet point on mine was make leaders, make winners, make men. I'm not sure where that came from. I pulled it from past fit reps for that exact billet as the Scout Sniper Platoon Commander, but I really liked it and made sure that was in the billet description to hold myself to that because I think that's extremely important. Making sure that you're not just creating like a micromanagement environment in the platoon, like you're empowering your NCOs and your team leaders to actually lead rather than just, do the training that you've assigned them to do. You're allowing them to actually create the training, be leaders. And that's especially important in the Scout Sniper platoon because when they go out on missions, it's a corporal or it's a sergeant who is the team leader. And they're going to be 20, 30 kilometers away from the nearest friendly unit. So it is extremely important that you have that trust in them and to be that leader. And that all kind of stems from, how you treat them and how you allow them to make training work. And then make winners. That's a big one. Like that's kind of a weird topic today. I don't think it's in the news as much anymore, but like everybody gets a medal or everybody gets a trophy. It's just not the case. And I think that was just a really good one I like is make winners. Like make sure they understand the value of it because it's extremely important in their job. If you don't win, the guy to your left and your right might not make it home. So it's extremely important that you win. And then make men. So it's important that they're very good at their job, but it's also important that they're good people.
Yeah.
That once they get out of the Marine Corps, which they will, that they've been set up for success outside of the Marine Corps, and you're fostering good, traits in them that are not just going to be important in the military. They're going to be important in their life as a friend, as a father, things like that. So I really like that one. Make leaders, make winners, make men. And then the last one is don't walk past the problem. So that's one I really like, and I actually just heard that a month ago from one of the Royal Air Force officers. I don't know. I think it's just really good, and it kind of rings in the back of my head now anytime I see something that's out of place. And that can go in any aspect of life. If you're passing somebody on the side of the road and they got a flat tire, like how do you know they've called somebody? Like just stop and ask them if they need help. Whatever it is, anything. If you see a problem, just take the time out of your day to stop and see if you can fix that problem. Don't just walk past it and assume somebody else is going to deal with it. I think that's a really good one, and something I've been trying to hold myself accountable to a lot more lately. Yeah, those are the 4 that I've come up with. Yeah.
Well, I'm gonna recap them from what I took from them because I love them. Man, being an athlete has a great story on my side. So I first heard it in a B1 brief from I think he was a lieutenant colonel at the time, but just our mission commander giving a brief, and he goes, I remember because I just started laughing when he said it. He was like, "All right, guys, if anything, just be an athlete." And I was like, "Wait, that doesn't make any sense. We're planning a mission to go like black line, right? Like from point A to point B. There is no like athlete. If you just follow the script step by step by step, nothing should go wrong. Like it should all just like flow. Like there, I remember being like, that's the dumbest thing I ever heard. Like, why should I have to be in it? And he meant like flexible, right? Like if something happens. But I was like, but I just spent a whole day planning this mission from start to finish. I shouldn't have to adapt or change anything I'm going to do.
Yeah.
So I left there like, nah, like that doesn't make sense. Like I'm not going to be an athlete. Like I'm just going to run the script, right? Just like do what we planned, and I don't have to change anything. And then we get in the jet, and things are going wrong. And I can't remember his call sign. It's going to come to me in a little bit, but he's just like up front, just like, all right, guys, just be an athlete. Be an athlete. And I'm on radio like, bro, no, just like do what we're told. And a couple flights go by, and I keep using it as like sarcasm, with my guys, like, oh, guys, just be an athlete, And then eventually it hits, and you mentioned it too, where you said, you just said something's going to happen, but we use it as the enemy as a vote, right? Like the enemy always has something to say. So if something's going to change the way you do something or you have planned. And that's when it clicked in me. I was like, shit, I got to be an athlete. And it was in the term of you have to adapt. You have to be able to think on your toes, adjust if it doesn't, like let's say basketball, for example, if you're not hitting a three-pointer and you need to change your shot, like that's what it means by being an athlete. Or an audible, right, is a good term for football. And so as soon as he said be an athlete, in the back of my mind, I started laughing. I was like, oh my God. I remember the first time I heard that term, I was like, this is dumb. Like, I'm a military person. We're so used to just like following the rules, A, B, C, D.
Yeah.
And now I use it in my life, like I tell some of my young airmen I mentor, I'm like, hey guys, sometimes you just gotta be an athlete, The enemy has a vote, you gotta adapt. You gotta switch directions. Yeah. So it's really cool to hear again from another perspective. But yeah, it was funny the first time I heard it. I was like, and obviously in the B1 community, we don't have a lot of people that follow sports. So when somebody mentions like a sports reference, I'm always like, oh, I like that. So it's funny to hear sports from somebody else, but it was hilarious. So I was like, oh man. Yeah. So anyways, that was a good one there. Never fell physically in front of your Marines. I love this one because you're setting higher standards or expectations that are just going to keep you going forward, where like you said, it's not going to be possible to not fail at everything. There's something I'm not going to be good at or fail at, but what you're doing is you're giving yourself that mindset to always win, always be the best. And even if you're never always the best, you're still aiming up there, right? Your pedestal is still higher. And so I use this a lot when I talk to airmen about commissioning. So I say a lot on my social media, like every enlisted member should be thinking of commissioning, regardless if you want to or not. And I get a lot of people that comment like, well, we need chiefs, we need E9s, we need this. And I'm like, yes, that's true. But early in your career, if you're thinking of commissioning or going to college, you're already setting that pedestal higher than where you're at. So in the back of your mind, and belief, right, is huge in success. If you can believe you're going to be something better in your life, even if let's say you don't think you're going to get there, you're automatically pushing yourself further than the pebble that's a little bit closer to you, where it's maybe just making the next rank. And so I'll tell them, like, that's cool if you want to be an E9, but I still want you to try to get your college degree. I still want you to work harder at this, because what if? What if you're at that E9 or E8 and you have the opportunity to become an officer and retire with a higher pay grade, right? You can still do it. You don't get to E9 and go, dang, I wish I would have got I think by then they should have their degree anyways. But if they don't have that path set up, they limit themselves. So that's where I took that when you talked about, where it's like, hey, if you're just setting the bar a little bit further, you're always going to aim for it. It's not an average bar.
Yeah.
That's the way I look at that one. Take risks and trust your NCOs. Your story was great. And I saw it a little bit in my career as an early captain, where I was with my commander one time, and the way he pictured that to me is he drew a road on the board, and he drew the dotted line in the middle, and he goes, hey, Manny, or Snare, when you go lead these airmen as a flight commander, I'm going to let you stay within these boundaries, right, of the road. Your job is to stay on the road. My job is to, like, slap you if you go in the gutter, right, or go on the shoulder. And so it allowed me to take that risk and trust the people below me to do those different things. And I did, I made PT mandatory for my flight when we got there at least 3 times a week. I opened up different meetings. I did different things, and only because I knew I had this big road to run on. And at the time, I knew I had somebody there to gut check me, but over time, I was able to sort of, gut check myself. I was able to make sure I stayed in the gutter or off the gutter. So that's where when you talked about that, and you talked about, hey, I started off here, but then as time grew, I got to build trust, and we actually got better by doing harder things and taking more risks. That was the overall arching thing I took from that is you're going to succeed more when you take those risks.
Yeah.
And we've seen it a lot of discussions with hired people in the military not taking these risks to stay safe, but we haven't seen the reward. As if we were to take those risks early and see what happens.
Yeah.
But the higher you get, it's harder to take risks. Like I'm starting to see that too. Like for generals and stars on their shoulders, it's really hard to take risks when you're up there.
Yeah.
But they take years down the road to really see a lot of that too. So, and I think for a lot of us younger generation, we expect the risk to change fast. We don't understand it's going to take time to see some of those rewards. Let's see. Make leaders, make winners, make men. I love because you mentioned it. You're not just making military people, you're helping them outside their life, like you're helping them succeed after the Marines or just being an overall human being, right? Like a Marine isn't their life, it's what guides it, but overall they're human beings. So how do we continue to make them better people outside of their workplace to where when they come to work, they're able to just continue to grow. And that leads right into the last one. Don't walk past the problem. What came to my mind is there's a concept I like. It's the way you do one thing is the way you do everything. And what that means is if I want to be great, let's say I'm really good at my work, but I'm not a good husband, or when I say good, like I'm not trying to be the best father, or do I leave dirty dishes on the table at night, or is my trash full, but I'm telling people to cut their mustache and hair. The way you do one thing is the way you do everything. Similar to don't walk past the problem. If there's something that needs to be fixed, fix it. And it's as simple as, sometimes taking out the trash, which is a great concept. We hear leaders say leaders take out the trash or leaders eat last, those little one nugget ones. But like you talk about, it's a hard one to do. And you say you're working on it all the time, like if it's not in my wheelhouse, but it's there, like for some of us, it's if I see a cart in the parking lot, I'm going to go push it back. That's don't walk past the problem. It's the same concept as the way you do, because the way you do one thing, leaving that cart out there, I will know it's the way you do other things. So if I see you leave a cart in the parking lot, I know you're probably going to slack in other areas of your life. Same as if I see somebody pulling in a cart, I might look at that guy and go, I bet you, he's probably a hard worker, just by that one action he did.
Yeah.
And so, those are good. I like them. I wrote them all down. Dang, yeah. I appreciate that. Now, when you got those, I'll ask really quick. You mentioned a couple of them, how you got them. You said the feedback one was where you got one, the being an athlete. Yeah, that's what I love about them. You never really came up with them on your own, right? Like, we're grabbing these leadership traits throughout our career. And that's what I want people to realize, too, is we don't just make up how to be a good leader. You can't do that anymore. All the tools have been played. They're laid out there. I tell a lot of people, all the traits I email you guys or my leadership philosophy, it's not new. Leading by example is not like something I created. It's what adapts to me. It helps me be a better person, and it's what I can be good at. So that's what I loved as well. Is you didn't just build these. You procured them along, and you're like, oh, I like that one, and then you just throw them in where you got to go.
Yeah. I mean, ultimately, it sounds like plagiarism where you're just taking all this stuff from everybody, but it's like finding the things that are natural to you and allow you to still be a natural leader, where you're not trying to force like this certain persona or these certain traits if it's not natural to you. And just, like the things that stick, they stick with you and you like feel it and you see it. Like taking risks and trusting your NCOs. For me, like that was just such it's something I could have read that in a book, like the first 6 months in the Marine Corps, and it would have meant nothing to me because I hadn't had to take any risk yet or trust my NCOs yet. It's something I came upon later. And then, if I reread it after that, it's gonna make sense and it's gonna stick. And so you don't want to like rush into creating this leadership. You don't want this like I'm trying to find a good word to describe it. It doesn't want to be fake. It has to be authentic.
Yeah.
And so you can't just read like these leadership books and just, try to apply them all into your style, your leadership style. It just has to come naturally. And sometimes that takes patience.
Yeah.
And a lot of the times, you're like second guessing or maybe having some self doubt. I know I did like very early on in my time as a platoon commander of like, am I doing this the right way? Am I being a good leader? And you just have to trust over time it's gonna fall into place as long as you're being authentic. And as long as you care and you're trying to do the right thing, it'll fall into place. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's also hard for young leaders to do is find leadership traits that adapt to them. A lot of young leaders are going to want to become leaders right away, so they're going to try to maybe do leadership traits that aren't natural to them, aren't meaningful to them, but they see other people do it, which is, I did that when I was an early flight commander. I was probably mimicking leadership traits of people I idolized, but it wasn't, real to me. It wasn't how I led, but I had to learn. I had to learn, nope, that one didn't work that time, or hey, I like that leadership trait. And this is one thing I cover a lot. And I heard, I just heard was it a podcast or was it a show? I'm not sure, but leadership it changes everywhere you go. It's reflected on the people you're leading. So your leadership traits should always change depending on where you are, right? Like for instance, you're not leading per se anybody right now, so your leadership traits are probably changing a little bit than when you were leading a platoon or a squad or something like that. And so that's what I wanted people to always remember is one leadership trait isn't going to work the same when it did somewhere else. Like my leadership philosophy may change, if I go to a new role somewhere else or I'm in a different position in my career. And so that's what I always harp on people is like, hey, that's why you have to have a toolbox or a toolkit or something to plug and play on which ones are going to learn. And some are going to fail. You have to get feedback. You have to learn. And then some are going to stick and you got to grab it and keep doing it.
Yeah.
Nice. All right. To wrap it up, what book do you got for those and myself today?
Matterhorn. Yeah.
Matterhorn.
So Matterhorn, it's by Carl Marlantes. It's Matterhorn. Yeah, it's a book written. Yeah, Carl Marlantes. He was a lieutenant in Vietnam, in the Marine Corps, and it's a book that's on a lot of reading lists when you're a lieutenant and going through TBS. And it's one I didn't read initially because it's a really big book. And it's also a book that's hard to relate to until, you've been a platoon commander. And it's also hard to relate to because, the situation that they're in Vietnam, it's, I have nothing to compare to that. But a lot of the things in the book, just some things never change. And you see a lot of similar situations, like when I was a platoon commander, seeing, Lieutenant Mellis go through like the same problems, just dealing with different personalities in the platoon, like the will of the leader pushing the platoon through really rough shit, and when times are really tough, and like making sure everybody's, keeping their head up. Just like little things like that. And it's also a really good book on how, to prevent, or at least prevent in yourself further down the line, like micromanagement, bad leadership, where, you see it from the lieutenant's perspective and his platoon's perspective that as they're going through the jungle in Vietnam and being retasked with basically the whole point of the book is they take this hill and Matterhorn. They build a defensive position on it. So, they build all these defensive positions, bunkers, fortify it to make it hard to take. And then the colonel orders them to go take another hill and abandon Matterhorn. However, later in the book, they're ordered to go back and take Matterhorn. That's now been seized by the NVA. So it's just, from their perspective, they're thinking, what in the world is going on? Like, where are these decisions being made? We had to take this hill. We lost a lot of guys. We're told to abandon the hill. Now the NVA have it. They're sitting in our foxholes. They're sitting in our defensive positions that we built. And now we're ordered again to go take it. and they lose more guys. And so to them, it's all about that communication, of like that platoon commander communicating what's going on. And then also from the perspective of that colonel who's, micromanaging this company through a radio, just so he can make general. Which it's just a really good book about a lot of those leadership problems, and the young Marines' lives who are permanently impacted by just bad decision making or selfish decision making. So yeah, it's like kind of not a horror. Well, I mean, it is a horror story, really, as a platoon commander that has just a lot of good lessons that need to be learned because, people died for those lessons to be learned. So I think it's a good book. Anybody who wants to be an officer in the armed forces, especially if you're interested in doing the infantry, whether, it's in the Army or the Marine Corps, like you've got to read Matterhorn. I think it's a really good book. There's a lot of good leadership lessons in there. And also it's just a really good book about life. He has a lot of very interesting outlooks that he gained from his time in Vietnam. Yeah.
Cool. Appreciate it. The book I brought, it's called What I Talk About When I Talk About Running, by, man, I'm going to butcher his name, Haruki Murakami, whatever. But anyways, I got it. Just I listen to a podcast called Founders that reviews books, and he wrote on there, it's a memoir of a guy who just really picked up running to become an author and incorporates it into his life. So it's more of his thoughts of what running has allowed him to be able to do and what he thinks about when he does. And obviously, since I've picked up running a little bit more, it's interesting to see that concept relate more to life and structure and habits and stuff. So it's a short book, though. It's only like 200 pages. So I'm looking forward to get through it pretty quick and get motivated a little more. But
Nice.
But cool, man. Do you have any last final shots or?
No. Just thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah. No, man, I appreciate your time too, especially on a Friday afternoon. Thank you. And then I'll follow up after if anybody wants to reach out to you, the best way to do that. For those listening, thank you. If you didn't take any notes, I'll be disappointed because I got my page of notes and you guys should have some notes as well. But again, if you guys took anything from it, thank you. Please save, share, follow, do whatever you got to do. And we'll continue on with the next one. All right, man. Go enjoy your Friday afternoon. Hang out for a little bit, and then we'll let it download.
All right.